This is Shu Hirata's Let's Talk Japanese Fight Sports with Charlie Jewett from sogokaku.com. Let's begin. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back to USA, and I'm very sorry for all the viewers for screwing up the last time. and we were supposed to do this last Sunday, but I had a little busy stuff. So we're finally back, and I think we're on live now. I think it's going, right? I mean,
yeah, I can see a little ticker on the top, so I think it's good.
Okay, good. So, let's quickly talk about this rising, Otoko Matsuri, because we have a couple of developments,
Mm-hmm.
I think I really want to, talk about new rising featherweight champion.
Yes.
Shaydullaev, who basically revealed after the fight that he had an offer from UFC before that fight. But although he choose to extend the contract for 2 fights. So he became a champion. So he has agreed to actually defend the title for 2 more fights. Now, what do you think about his decision? And what do you thought about that fight? At first of all.
Well, first I'll talk about the fight because it wasn't a very long fight.
Let's do that, yeah.
I thought the stoppage was a little premature because Koike, he's a ground fighter. It's a championship match. But that being said, it was to a point where I don't think the result would have changed. So I don't have that big of a problem of it. I just personally would have liked to have seen it go a little longer.
Yeah, I see that Kleber was complaining right after the referee stepped in, right? So he was obviously conscious. And you know how he was tried to get into the guard position. He may have got pounded out from there, but I agree with you. He's champion, so I think the ref should have given him a, way to go out like a champion.
It's kind of funny though, because immediately after the fight, back to your next question, Sakakibara was like super defensive about the UFC stuff. He immediately was like, first he tried this thing where he like negged the UFC. He was saying, everyone says they want to go to the UFC, but it's not that easy. You're going to go over there. You don't speak English. It's going to be difficult. You're competing in a large pool of fighters. And I think that's true, but I think he's just kind of tired of people constantly asking him if he's worried if fighters are going to the UFC, which actually it looks like it's a real fear because it sounds like Shaydullaev did have a UFC offer going into this, and he chose to stay in Rizin, which I think, my opinion is that's the correct decision because he's in the perfect position. If the UFC isn't going anywhere, he's the Rizin champion now. So he's going to be getting top billing, high-profile fights with the entire Rizin promotional machine behind him. He's going to get way more attention doing this, way more eyes on him. He's going to get good money from Rizin. And then if he does want to go to the UFC, he can negotiate a way better contract to go in.
I totally agree because he's got a potential to become a Fedor of featherweight. And you know how back then, how long ago was it? 15 years ago when UFC offered them the 30 million, 6 fights or whatever that is. Then the potential now in 2025 will be much bigger, right? As long as what he needs to do is keep winning and keep that perfect record and, try to get on UFC's nerve in the sense that, hey, there's a guy out there in the 145 who's maybe better than your champion, right?
Yeah, if he can build his mystique over here so that the fans start talking about, this guy's good in the UFC. But have you seen this guy over in Japan who's just destroying everybody? That would really help build his brand. And, I know he's not from Azerbaijan, but the UFC is going to Azerbaijan. So they're clearly interested in that region.
That region, yeah, for sure. Right.
The region is a hotbed of UFC, MMA fans. So him being from that region also makes him more valuable to the UFC if he can be the face of the promotion in those markets. And so if he can build this aura around him, like the Fedor was, and then he eventually goes to the UFC, I think it's perfect for him.
Yeah, it is. And he's young too. So he doesn't have to really rush it because, face it, after the post non-drug test era of UFC, the champions tend to be a little bit older, late 20s to like early 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like he still can play around for, I wouldn't say play around, but earn good money, establish his value for the next 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we were talking about it a little bit before stream, but I'm just saying, like, outside of the UFC and Rising, there's not a lot of big players out there.
No, and I know you started noticing that guy like Ryan Bader, who signed with the Rising, is now on Harry show telling everybody that Rising has a potential to become a number 2 MMA promotions in the world. And I don't know, if from my point of view, okay, PFL is great and they're offering like $500,000 to the winner. That's great, but in terms of really being in the business, like how many tickets you sold, what kind of like arena you fill to sponsorship, all kinds of stuff, Rising maybe already the number 2 besides KSW.
Saying they have potential to be number 2 is kind of I see what he's coming from, but in my perspective, I agree with you in that even when Bellator was around, I still think Rising was doing way better than Bellator. And I think they're doing better than PFL's doing now. So if I did list the top 3, I mean, UFC is clearly number 1. And then it's either Rising or KSW.
Right, but it's just that for the North American fans, you don't really hear too much about the KSW. So it's for Asian fans, right? Basically, So, and again, it's like, I guess it's the other way of the point of view from the European fans. You don't hear too much about Rising, I guess. So it's the same thing, but it's a regional thing. Those are that region that each promotions are sort of dominating. Right. So, and I mean, like for example, Poland. I mean, when was the last time UFC did the show in Poland? Quite a while ago. They never went back, right? And even the Japan show too. It's been a while,
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I know it depends on a bunch of factors, but they actually have a pretty deep Japanese roster now. If they got someone like Kai to get high up in the rankings, I think we could see a Japan show in the future.
In the future, we'll see. Because another thing I want to get into, I guess since we're talking about the UFC, I can get into this. That I always talk about, like, when the last time UFC did the pay-per-view show in Japan, with Benson Henderson against, I think it was Edgar, whatever,
Edgar, yeah.
Yeah, and that was $1 was like 79 yen. And UFC always seeks for a sure way to go to the foreign country and do the show, meaning they like to secure a contract with a local promoter. And back then it was the case of Dentsu was the biggest agency in Japan until this day. And for them to buy that rights, right? I mean, dollar to 79 yen compared to what right now? Dollar to what? 146, whatever that is. I mean, it's double the money. So I still think it's a tall order because partly I heard the rumor that Docomo was supposed to like mainly sponsor one Japan show, and that didn't happen. So I don't know who else can afford to buy a UFC Japan show.
Plus, I mean, you got to think if the UFC is going to come to Asia, they probably want to go to China or something like that.
Yeah, they already announced the Shanghai show, right, in August. So, yeah, I mean, it only makes sense, right? I mean, Zhang Weili is in a movie now. So, but to go back to, let's see, this Otoko Matsuri, right? I mean, is there any? I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, which didn't get streamed. But any other fights you really want to touch it? And
I mean, I thought overall it was a good show. I mean, I was impressed. I mean, I think Ersan Yamamoto impressed me. Performance is probably one of his best performances to date. That wasn't just like an immediate finish. The Daisuke Nakamura fight against Sakuraba kind of derailed the Sakuraba train a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually too bad for what's his name, Sakakibara, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure he wanted to promote, Sakuraba, right? In a way, I mean, he, of course, he's a prior promoter, he still seeks for that kind of a same kind of a fan base. So, all right. So this is what I wanted to talk about right now. Now, what do you thought about? Did you watch the Hiroya against Shinozuka?
I did, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me tell you this. Since it's been 2 weeks since I talked to you last time, I'm going to reveal something I can reveal, which is like in that Tokyo Dome show, like because Ren Hiramoto is out and everything else, and they only had like about 30,000 people maybe secure, but they wanted to see at least 40 or 50. So it looks good on television. And they ended up selling at least 40, right? I mean, so they had a pretty good crowd. And most of the fans, or most of the fighters who were there, like Naoki even told me this, that the Tokyo Dome exploded when Mikuru won, of course, because the older fans there. The second most exciting fight was this one.
Yeah.
Hiroya against Shinozuka. The whole venue exploded. And
well, that makes sense because Hiroya is very closely associated with Mikuru.
Mm-hmm.
He trains at JTT. He's from Breaking Down. He's kind of been seen as like one of Mikuru's like #1 students, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And Shinozuka is Ren's boy, right? So,
but I mean, all the Mikuru fans that were there already are obviously, most of them are probably supporting Hiroya as well. And I remember when Hiroya was fighting on deep shows, he was never the main event when I went, but he would fight. And after his fight, I'm not exaggerating when I think 60, 70 people would just stand up and leave. Like, there were people clearly there just to see him fight. He's very popular.
It's amazing in a way that I can't really reveal the numbers, but he probably sold way more. He got probably way more pay-per-view shares than some of the champions. Majority of the champions, I would have to say. So. I mean, there's I think I told you this before, from the Pride days to now, that in the Japanese MMA promotion, or any promotion, it doesn't matter, but they have this matchmaking meeting, of course, right? And they are a group of people who has a voice that saying that, hey, you can even do a Rizin show with putting Hiroya in the main event. I mean, but is that going to keep the standard of like a high-end, a top competition, right? I mean,
well, that's always you when you have like the Breaking Down fighters doing well.
Yes,
it's like this. We'll probably get into this later, but like the same thing with in Deep Jewels. There's a really popular fighter named Akipi, who used to be Rising Girl.
Right. Yeah.
That girl sells a ton of tickets. Like, if you go to a Deep Jewels show, maybe like a third of the people are there to see her, but she's never going to be representing like the high skilled level fighter.
Exactly. So sort of like an influencer category, right? Well, like entertainment category.
You and I are familiar with this. Maybe people outside are not as familiar, but like the best way to describe it is like Japan's idol culture.
Yes. I mean, I'm sure Akipi's fans are all my age to 30, whatever it is, right? The male.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hiroya is like the male version of that. He's like an idol. Lots of female fans who are supporting him. So, I got to tell you this, that of course there's a group of people in this business who pushes to make sure the business is business, So the fighter who sells tickets values a lot. But there's also a group of guys who believe that, to keep it up with the UFC or number 2, number 3 in the world as an MMA promotion, you still have to have a top talent in terms of skill sets of MMA. Well, that's why when Rising first got started, it's so important that while you're also having these like freak show fights, where you're having like Baruto fight, or you're having like the Egyptian sumo wrestler fight Bob Sapp, it's also important that you have Tenshin fighting, that you have guys like Horiguchi fighting, or Ayakawa Hamasaki. There's always the balance where you have to have the skilled fighters, but you also got to have the popular fighters that are going to bring people that aren't fans of MMA yet. They're going to bring their eyes to the event.
Right. So that would be the correct argument, right? But I'm feeling and I'm sensing that the argument from the competitive oriented sides has been pretty weak these days. Because
you could say that about a couple promotions in Japan right now.
I know exactly. So I will tell you right now that I can reveal the fact that Naoki, who defended the title, that I will reveal that he has only one fight left on the contract, and Doubtbeck was thinking about going down to 135. So knowing Naoki, he always wants to fight tough guys. So and he wanted to fight Doubtbeck, but it would not be good enough. I will not have enough time to make it by July because they have a Super Rising show in July, right, with a stadium version. So no more Doubtbeck for now, and it'll be probably another opponent.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but again, something like that tells you that even the featherweight or bantamweight in Rizin still not enough fighters to make it look like a league, to have like a rankings, right? I mean, so that I wanted to get into this since we talked about UFC. Let's talk about the it's kind of sad, but Asia Road to UFC review. Did you have a chance to see these fights?
I watched some and I read the results of some as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was bloodbath for if you're supporting Japanese fighters. It was an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah, in my view, the Vega Yuji had the best potential. And
sorry?
This guy Yuji, Vega had the best potential, in my point of view. And he lost in the decision. He was coming back, but it was just not fast enough. And he got kind of stormed in early, which happened in Combate Global too. So he has to put his gears on much faster, right? But in terms of here's what it is. I wanted to point it out that so it's 1-7 in road to UFC for the Japanese guys. Only one fighter advanced to the semifinal.
Of the people in the tournament, yes, only one.
Yeah, and Arisa Matsuda won. You're right. We can talk about that. I think we got to give her credit because she beat the last year's runner-up.
Well, we can just talk about her now to get out of the way.
Yeah.
I was impressed with her just because Fang beat Miki Matono twice, which isn't easy. She finished once. She was the runner-up last year. And for strawweight, Fang is huge. She is a tall, tall lady. And Arisa Matsuda doesn't have a lifetime of combat sports experience.
No.
She was a baseball player,
right.
Clearly physically gifted. So the fact that she's able to hang in with a girl of Fang's caliber, to me, was impressive.
Right. And I sincerely hope if Mick doesn't pick her up this year, they should do that. I hope they do the women's strawweight tournament. And put her back in there. So
strawweight in Japan barely exists now. Like 10 years ago, it was vibrant, but there's no competition for her in Japan.
No.
So she needs something like this.
And she was fighting at the flyweight too, right? Yeah. So
right.
No, I'm happy for her for that win and get her more confidence. And here's what it is. Biggest concern is this. All these Japanese fighters lost on the first round, posted on X or Instagram saying that, I'll try my best to come back to this stage again. Again, that's the, like a trend I see from some of the Japanese fighters. Once you experience that environment, fighting for Zuffa, UFC event, they just treated a little bit better than, Japanese shows. And, you feel like you're in the big time, but you gotta understand, road to UFC is not a UFC. Right? So, if you lost it, and the chances are you may not get called back the next year. And
what you said right there is my big thing, is I don't like it when fighters decide to wait for something. I think they should be actively pursuing something.
Exactly, right.
You have very little say in whether or not you get into the road to UFC. You get don't get picked.
And
so you have more that you have more power to achieve. Like if I win enough fights, I can do this.
Right. And what? So I gotta tell you this on the record that the fighter has to realize that Japanese promoters are actually one of the easiest in a way to work with, in a sense that if you want one fight contract, they'll take it. You know what I mean? Like, so, make yourself active and you could still make it the road to UFC next year. You know what I mean? There's no reason to sit around and wait for it.
No, that's like the worst thing you could do, in my opinion.
Yeah. And also, I have to point out that every year, the quality of a Japanese fighter going to the road for UFC is not exactly getting better. I mean, reason for that is that, face it, that all the top Japanese guns are fighting for Rizin. And, and if you became champion there or top fighter there, and they might get the call from UFC when they go. So, the point is, what's the point for most of the Japanese fighters right now to really go through a road to UFC?
It's like the world's longest application process.
Yeah, in a way.
Like,
right.
I would rather see a fighter go dominate in Shuto or Pancrase or Deep, then go to Rising, win a couple fights in dominant fashion, and just go directly into the UFC. I don't like this long negotiation process of going through the road to the UFC and then getting those crappy road to UFC contracts. I'm sorry, but go get a real contract.
Here's the reason, Charlie. From my point of view, who actually books fighters, but I have a gut feeling here that even though you're undefeated, became a champion, Deep, Shuto, Pancras, whatever, go to the Rising and win 2 fights, 3 fights in dominating fashion. I'm not really sure if we can get a good offer from UFC. Or even let alone get an offer. I think you have to become a champion. And that's when you do hoping to do a little bit of a power negotiation, right?
Well, if your dream is the UFC, just thinking out loud, then maybe you do that, and then you take the Bay Noah route where you go over and fight in the LFA a couple times or something like that. But I just
since you mentioned LFA, I have to talk about this because I want to touch on this current status of feeder shows in Japan or North America. I won't name names or do the figures, but officially, I can tell this right now that you fight for LFA's title fight, you fight for the title fight in Deep, you'll be making more money in Deep. Even though you're considering it's $1 to 146 yen exchange rate.
Yeah.
So, in a way that the UFC is so dominant, I think all the fighters are willing to fight for the USA feeder shows for much less money than, let's say, fighting for Europeans or Asian feeder shows. Try to create a clean record like 5-0, 6-0, whatever that is. So they could try to get into contenders, right? That's the kind of trend in North America now. And then there's a road to UFC, and they're trying to convince those fighters in Japan to get into this tournament. It could last a year and a half. So it's still becoming quite difficult,
I just don't like the way that the road to UFC, the fighters have to wait around and see if they got picked or not. It seems to be like a nice hampering effect on their career.
Yeah, exactly. But I think only the Japanese fighters are kind of sitting around and waiting. I think most of them are kind of making them active, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, it's funny. I think it's like a brand name that's associated with the fighter. So once you get into the octagon, you get that brand name, you feel like you have to kind of wait for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's really not like that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, so I want to talk quickly about this one. Kaito lost in ONE FC, because the reason I want to talk about this is this. He had a problem with
Yeah, he didn't want. For those that don't remember, or just refresh your memory,
uh-huh.
he turned down a fight at the One Japan show,
right?
Because the fighter didn't make weight, which then led to Chatri making a bunch of negative comments about shoot boxing and Kaito.
Mm-hmm.
And then shoot boxing complained, so then Chatri had to apologize. And then Kaito got a fight on one of their Thailand shows, which is kind of like where they do their one fight contracts, and didn't do well. He did not do well in his performance. So he actually, I've heard he hasn't done well in most of his international performances.
No, not really. And he get to fight in the one Friday night fight, whatever. And I'll tell you this on the record. I'm hearing that most of the fighters are getting a one fight contract.
Yeah.
And getting
those Friday night fight contracts.
Yeah, even though it's only one fight contract, it's attached with the year of a matching period, meaning that you can talk to the other promotions about your fights, but one have a right to offer a match to offer, right? So, in the world of kickboxing, it's really hard to get it. And face it, the one is the best, right? In terms of a kickboxing promotion, they pay the best, they got the best fighters. So.
They just signed that top Muay Thai guy from Japan.
Yes, right. So
got him to a multi-fight contract.
Right. So I mean, for kickboxer, I can see it because another guy that I wanted to mention was the Kuroda who settled with the K1. He constantly talking about the opportunity to get into one championship. So for kickboxing in Japan, unless Rizin can come up with more establishing a solid kickboxing division, it's not much choices out there.
No, because I think the Rizin has kickboxing fights. Don't get me wrong, but there's never been an attempt to organize it into divisions.
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
they didn't do that for Tenshin. I don't think they're going to do that in the near future at all. So.
Yeah, I mean, here's what it is. I'm really feeling this from the Rizin organization. Some of the people who has an effect on the matchmaking, they still have like a love for sort of like a pro wrestling mind. That's what led to that heavyweight tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go back to that. I mean, what do you thought about the heavyweight tournament in the Otoko Matsuri?
Even Sakakibara
period on that show.
Ueda was the only good fight.
Right.
Every other one of those heavyweight fights was awful. And I think the rest of the heavyweight fights are on the Sapporo card, right?
Right, exactly.
But I mean, even Sakakibara admitted that those fights were terrible. The problem is Rizin has had heavyweight Grand Prix in the past that I have found very exciting. Like especially the year where it was like Krokop, King Mo, Amir Ali Akbari, Barito. And what those fights had, what that tournament had, that this tournament doesn't, is it was so easy to market that event. King Mo, well-known established fighter. Krokop, old legend. Then you get Barito. That's kind of like the comedic freak show fight. You have the big sumo wrestler.
Right, exactly. Right.
Then you have Amiri Akbali, who looks like a monster from Iran. You don't have to have seen this guy fight. He just looks like a monster. So people were interested immediately. These fights on this show were just fat people with no stamina that couldn't finish each other.
I know that's too bad though, because they have access to pro wrestlers.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but better heavyweight talents.
I mean, that Sudario fight was awful.
I know, and it's painful. We have to go see the semifinal and final, right?
Plus, I mean, the Ueda fight also I don't know how I feel about that because he won by a great way, but his opponent has famously had taped up knees his entire career. So I don't know how impressive a low kick knockout of him is. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, but here's what it is. I've cornered so many fights in my career, probably over a couple hundred fights, and I must admit, in terms of watching from a corner's point of view, if you're a fan, again, most exciting fight I've ever cornered was the Nogueira versus Dave Herman.
Yeah,
it was a heavyweight fight. I mean, it was just so heavyweight fighters can create the fights that you can never be replaced by the lightweight fighters. I'm sorry, I say that to all these lightweight fighters, but I could see that some of the guys in Rizin is really pushing for big guys. Well,
it makes sense because I mean, only heavyweights can deliver the crazy power.
Yes,
that they deliver.
Right.
They look like monsters in there, but the problem is, I'll throw an example out. No one will ever forget the UFC show in Denver. I think it was Mark Hunt versus Ben Rothwell in high altitude. It was one of the most boring fights. Those guys got exhausted immediately, and it was just two people falling over each other. which is what most of the heavyweight fights in this tournament were.
Exactly, but compared to that, right, in the back in Pride era, if I was Sakibara, I would be still remembering Krokop versus Nogueira. Like Fedor versus Krokop.
The difference is those heavyweights weren't like, how do I say this? They weren't fat heavyweights. Those guys were in shape. They were kind of smaller heavyweights that looked like they could have the stamina to go. Whereas some of the guys in this tournament they don't even look like they're in shape. It looks awful.
Yeah, again, so it's clearly tells and obviously that the Rizin reached out to all these different promotions, right? To ask them to dispatch or their, top fighters or champions or whatever. And
I mean, didn't they find Edie? Wasn't Edie part of the heavyweight tournament?
Was it? Like, I think so. In the first, he lost, right? Like
the very first one, yeah.
Exactly. So my point here is that you got to that point is that, I mean, all right, to create the heavyweight tournament to make fans feels more excited, it would be better to ask other promotions all over the world to, represent the fight, get the fighter who represent their promotions. But what, like you got to give Shingo a credit for discovering very good fighters like Shaydullaev, the Databek, kinds of stuff. So they should let him choose the fighters, really.
I have a question.
Promotions,
So I just had a thought. In the first couple of heavyweight tournaments, there wasn't really a Japanese fighter in the tournament that could have won it. So do you think with this current tournament, you have Sidario and Ueda, so they have the task of finding heavyweights that they think can be competitive, but Sidario can also beat because they want a Japanese fighter to win the tournament. So they have to find the right level of fighter. They can't get someone too good because they want the Japanese fighter to win.
Here's what it is, Charlie. I'll tell you this on the record that I don't think they really want the Japanese fighters to win this tournament. And it's funny in a sense that people think, oh, the Japanese promoters pretty want all Japanese to win, but it's really not like that with the Rizin. I mean, they have experience of being successful with non-Japanese fighters, obviously, right? Many of them. And so they understand that sometimes it's worth to spend time, invest, right? And give them, fights to build them up and stuff like that. So, I mean, I know I'm going to go a little bit off the topic here, but like guy like Sabatero, who came in, won the bantamweight fight and immediately say, I want to fight Naoki. They would not give a Naoki fight immediately. They would prefer to give him another fight or maybe even two fights to build him.
Yeah.
Right? So in that sense, that's why I'm saying that they should let Shingo pick the fighters instead of going out to those promotions to make it look like a grand, like Olympic kind of thing that they represented from the different, promotion from the world,
He's found good heavyweights in the past. I mean, he brought Junior Tafa over, and that guy was a monster.
Exactly. So, I mean, even the Fedor and everybody else back in the Pride days almost, that they really went out and looked for those, like, uncut gems, right? I mean, so that's what they should go back to. So I think this, in a way, the heavyweight tournament is a kind of failure.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the champion? Obvious that since the title, I mean, the Grand Prix finals is going to be held in September, meaning if the winner is healthy, they're probably going to have to fight Bader, right? Ryan Bader in the New Year's Eve.
I think the heavyweight tournament is already a failure after the first round. The first round's not even over yet. I think it's a failure. I think none of the Japanese fans are talking about it. Ueda doesn't have, I'm not being mean, but he's just not a popular fighter yet. He's still very young. Nobody knows who the other people are. So I think it's already kind of a failure.
Yeah, that's too bad, right? I mean, yeah. So, let's talk about this within the Rizin Otoko.
Now, this is not a failure. This is much more exciting to everybody.
Yes. You know what? I meant to tell you this, but I can't reveal who's in the tournament, but I think they're going to announce all the competitors in probably upcoming maybe a Hokkaido show.
Well, Sakakibara already announced that he thinks Rizin Yamamoto will be in it. He thinks that Shinyu will be in it.
No, Shinryu and Ito, we took a fight with the condition that both win or lose, they're going to be in.
That's what I'm saying. I think Shinryu and both. He said Shinryu and both Ito are going to be in it.
Yeah.
And in the same interview, I think he said Ursa Yamamoto and Hiroya are also going to be in it.
So how many of the Japanese is that, right? I mean,
we're already up to 4.
Right. So I think I'm hearing that it's going to be maybe 1 or 2 more Japanese. So it pushes a little bit of so-called non-Japanese categories into maybe 2 or 3. But they're also setting up a 1 reserve fight with 1 Japanese versus non-Japanese. And so if somebody misses weight, winner of that fight could go into the Grand Prix.
Yeah. I think didn't Sakakibara, I mean, the interview I read is now a couple weeks old, but they were still at that time deciding how many people to have in the tournament.
But right. It's right now it's set for 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 1 reserve fight on the opening, round, which is on July. And
will the finals take place on New Year's Eve, do you think?
Yes. That's the plan is. And I'll tell you this, that I think they're going to give a winner and a runner-up same amount as a heavyweight Grand Prix.
Okay.
Which is 20 million yen for the winner, which will be what, like 160K, 150K, somewhere around there. Right. So again, outside the UFC, we go back to the argument that how many flyweights makes that kind of money? Yeah. Remember, that's a winner. And the point is this, that you fight first round in July, second round, semifinal, right, in September, and final in December. Yeah. So a guy like my client Shinryu, who just fought, that's like 4 fights per year.
Busy year.
Yeah, and remember, they're getting paid every fight on the regular purse, so the tournament winning purse is different issues. So again, it's funny. Again, but still in a guy like Shinryu, who's young, who's very ambitious, he always talked to me about the possibility of like, what about the road to UFC? I mean, like, dude, think about the money you're making, right? He's a newlywed. How are you going to talk to your wife? That's what I'm going to tell him. The money he's making 4 times a year, potential to make plus,
Well, plus this flyweight tournament's gonna have so much attention on it. It's going to be the main storyline for Rizin probably for the rest of the year.
I think so too, because
unless they book Ren versus Mikuru on New Year's or something, this is.
If Ren can make it, I think they probably want to do that, right? I mean,
yeah. But that fight, that one fight aside, I think this Grand Prix will be the main storyline for Rizin for the rest of the year.
But remember, Charlie, they're doing the Super Rizin show at the end of July, which is a stadium version.
Yeah, so who are they going to put on that? Like all their fighters are booked or just fought.
Yeah, but I think they really want to put up all the title fights.
Well, guess what? Chihiro Suzuki said he's not fighting again this year. He's out till next year.
Right, so he's gone, right? But they got the Shaydullaev featherweight, who's healthy, ready to go, obviously, right? And they got the bantamweight Naoki, he's ready to go. Okay. So there's one more. So, at least couple, 2 or 3 title fights. Maybe Izawa.
They got to give Seika Izawa a fight. She hasn't fought in a while.
Yeah, but I'm hearing that, obviously, like I think everybody knows that the fights the Rizin really want to book is Reina versus Izawa. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if that's going to happen because Reina's injured. So
yeah, and the drama behind that fight is always amusing.
Yeah, I heard they're going on the public and they're going to beef right now. Is that
didn't Seika at the last Rizin at the Otoko Matsuri? Izawa went up in the ring, had the mic, talked about essentially she's tired of waiting to fight Rena. She wants to fight. There's no one left for her in Japan. She just wants to fight strong foreign opponents. I never understood the Japanese obsession with like fighting strong, quote unquote, foreign opponents. But yeah, and then
ex-UFC fighters, so they can tell their sponsors and people around her or him that I may be better than UFC guys or girls. Yeah. I think that's the theory.
Plus, there's this whole their beef's gone back a while because Izawa made comments that like Rena didn't belong in the Grand Prix when she was in it, and Rena's also made comments about how WMA in Japan is dying under Izawa's leadership. The popularity is plummeting, which, I mean, kind of is.
Kind of obviously they're trying to build Machi as their next challenger or star, whatever it is. So
it's no secret that he's even admitted it. One of the matchmaker, what is his name,
Sasahara said that he wishes he has 10 Machis.
Yeah, I think Machi is like his favorite fighter. So
probably he said that. So yeah.
So there's no. I mean, she's fighting in Sapporo against Salt, who nothing against Salt, but I think it's probably a give me fight for Machi if I was a betting man. And then, but the problem with Machi is she seems to want to fight at 52 kilo. And I'm wondering if Rizin is going to transition from 49 to 52.
Right. So I think it's all up to Izawa. At this point, if the Reina can't do the fight against Izawa, I think Rizin would ask Izawa to take the Machi fight and do 115 if the Machis prefer 115.
Yeah.
I mean, she's getting any fights now.
Plus, I mean, most popular woman in Rising right now. I mean, what? Kate Lotus, maybe. I mean,
yeah. That's the point. The point is another. Like in Rising, they have a competition category and also entertainment category, right? Like influencer category. So
I think Kate Lotus is fighting on the Korea show, right? She's fighting Yuri Shim. That fight's going to get way more views than any Sekai Sawa fight. So,
yeah, and I'm surprised the Korea shows they sell out pretty fast, right? They announced that all the tickets are sold out a couple of weeks after it went on sale. So
it's a good card. There's a bunch of good fights on that card.
Right. And Hokkaido is not a bad card, too.
No, and people thought that last year's Hokkaido card was weak. That last year, Hokkaido's card delivered great fights. And it's got some good fights on there this year, too. So I'm definitely checking. I'm a fan. So,
man, I mean, now you're in America now, but still everybody tells me that Rising as a brand is really like popular right now. So when you really look at it, they don't require too many top talents from outside of Japan to be there to keep going with this tour. You know what I mean? Like events that they sell out.
It's kind of interesting because now that it's been going around for a while, the Hokkaido show, you're like, all right, they're going to have Reiki Endo on there from Pancrase. They're going to have Salt there. They're going to have a couple of locals that appear on Rising just at these events. And then they're going to have maybe one or two top-level fighters. So, yeah, I mean, they have enough fighters now. And I think the reason for this is when COVID happened, Rising had to stop relying on the old business model of just bring in Thai or Korean fighters for them to fight.
Right, exactly. And they realize that they can make a lot of business with the Japanese fighters too, like 80% Japanese fighters, but 20% kind of thing.
Well, a bunch of these local shows, a bunch of local fighters want to fight on those shows. And I bet they pay them very little because they just want to fight on the show. So, I mean.
Yeah, it's funny, but again, from a few years ago, the Japanese media has been using the word Galapagos, meaning that, like Japanese MMA is totally kind of different from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they have their own game, they have their own thing, and, and they're making really good money type of stuff. So, but here's what it is. I think the matchmaker Shingo is more into competition too, right? I mean, he's
clearly.
Clearly he wants to sign good fighters.
I think if you had to compare them, I think Sasahara's way more of like a pro wrestling fan, and Shingo's way more in getting the best fighters.
And also, it's not those two; it's other people attend. Making meetings. So, yeah.
Plus, you have the occasional sponsor telling you what fighter they want to see on an event.
Yeah, that's always because I see some of the guys in the Rising Hokkaido show too, right? I mean, obviously. He got pushed by them.
I know a couple of them as well. I've seen a couple as well pop up.
Right. So quickly, let's talk about this one. Kume retired.
Yeah.
He was a very good fighter, but it was 5 years past peak to go to the world. You know what I mean? Like,
I still maintain his fight with Takada in Rising was one of the best fights in Rising's history.
Mm-hmm.
On a war. I mean, plus the background of it, Deep champion versus Pancrase champion. In Rising, I mean, you couldn't have asked for better. Kume was a great fighter, and him retiring, I mean, not great for Pancrase. He was one of their more dominant champions when he was around.
I always wonder why he didn't try to go to UFC when he was peaking. I mean, he stuck around, not even in a big show in Japan. You know what I mean? Like, always with Pancras,
Well, I mean, that happens in Japan. You get fighters that they're happy in their promotion and they're comfortable. They get treated well. Yeah.
Or maybe it's coach's decision too.
Well, that happens a lot as well.
That's probably more the case, I think, in terms of Kuma. Now, hey, I want to talk about this, which I didn't discuss with you, but what do you think about this Zuffa Lee case got settled? And all the issues about the third party controlling a ranking or belt kind of thing got pushed to the second case.
I'm not as familiar with this. So Kung Lee Zuffa's case settled?
Yeah. It got approved by the judge. And how much was it?
Was this the class action suit?
Yes. 375 millions over about 1,000 fighters who fought between, I think it was 2010 and 2017 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, of course, lots of my clients are involved in this, and the fighters are still getting letters. And do you know the fact that there are a chunk of fighters who is still not registered?
Yeah, I have read about that. Were they refusing to register because they thought they wanted to sue on their own later down the road or something?
I have no idea, but I hear this for sure. I don't want to name here, but some of the big name fighters are refusing to register. I don't know why. If they're on, can they sue on their own? I don't know the law.
I don't think they can, to be honest. But
yeah, I mean, how does it work? I mean, you do the class action lawsuits, and you're given an opportunity to register, and you refuse. You have a right to go.
Do they feel like if they do this, they might upset the UFC, so they don't want to do that?
That's another point. I'm not going to name names or country, but there are one country, at least I know, that majority of fighters are refusing to register because they think they don't want to offend the UFC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, how does it work on the class action lawsuits? I wanted to ask you about that, actually.
Well, I'm not as familiar with class action lawsuits, but I would think if you're a member of the class and you're notified of the class action lawsuit, I would think that you have to join the class action lawsuit if you want to do that.
So if you refuse, do you have a right to go and hire your own lawyer and do your own lawsuit?
I don't know. That's not my area.
So. Yeah, but I guess they could try, right? I mean,
try, but yeah.
No, you'd be surprised. I mean, I will tell you this after this streaming is over. I know the names who refuse to register. They're very big names. And in the beginning, they had the rumors about those unregistered fighters' money will go to charity. That's out the window. And now it's all the unregistered fighters' money will split into the registered fighter. And I think most of the fighters who only fought 2 or 3 or 4 times in the UFC, for them, those chunk of unregistered money will be much bigger than what they're going to get. So, yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting, though, right? I mean,
yeah, it's kind of because at first it didn't seem like Kung Lee was going to get anywhere, but I mean, good for him.
And it's 10 years now. It's been, And there's also, the argument here is that if these people didn't stand up and do it, they'll never get any of that money anyway. So even though it's not a big, huge money, you should be appreciative that you're getting money, Well,
I'm sure the lawyer is getting well paid, so I'm sure he's happy, or they're happy.
Hey, I'm going to tell viewers now that Mr. Charlie, you're your attorney, so right?
Yeah, I'm sure the attorneys weren't doing this out of the goodness of their heart. I'm sure they're getting a nice percentage of this.
Right. You know what? I tell you this honestly, and I started checking all these lawyers' fee and Oxcon, like in a pharma, like a surgical problem, and some of the lawyers are charging like $2,500 per hour.
Yeah. You gotta,
yeah. But anyway, but I'm actually more interested in your opinion on. Okay, money is settled, or whatever. Some people are happy, some people are not happy, whatever. But I thought the biggest issue is about third-party controlling a ranking or belts, all kinds of stuff. But that got pushed to the second case. On the case like class action suits, when you get pushed to the second case on that issue, do you think this would be pursued on the second case?
Well, I mean, now that the money's been paid out,
that's my point, right?
I wonder if the lawyers are motivated to keep going.
I have to agree with you on that. I wouldn't,
because if the second one's not going to pay anything, then you're essentially spending.
The second one's still going to pay, but is it worth to go and hustle more? Because most of it, I think it's clearly the second case money part will be settled based on the first case, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless if it's a major increase on the pay scale at that period of time. So, I mean, exactly. My big question is like, if I were an attorney, I wouldn't be motivated to really go extra work on this ranking. And
if I was a lawyer, to me, this would be done.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, but I'm happy that I think, I called out all the fighters in Japan, regardless if they're not Japanese, my clients or not, that I urge everybody to register. So at this point, except one, I think everybody registered.
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't register, especially if you live in a different country.
Right. I mean, just so get the money, right? I mean, and it's funny in the sense that even though like non-clients of mine, they go through my friends and they send me the letter they received from an attorney and asking me what to do and stuff like that. I mean, come on. I mean, just sit and wait at this point, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's
always interesting.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. So anyway, so I think we did we cover all the topics for today?
Let's go over some of the comments that we have.
Okay, let's see what the comments here go. Let's see.
Okay. So
right. Do you think Rizin wants Zuffa to represent Rizin because they believe he can become a UFC champion? Also, what are the chances for Rizin to commit featherweight tournament if he vacates?
I think based off of Sakakibara's comments, he's very tired of fighters leaving Rizin for the UFC. I think it's kind of a known secret that maybe he didn't want Horiguchi to leave at this exact time, that he wanted him to be around to help with the tournament. And I think if Shai keeps winning, they're probably going to try to, in their power, keep him in Rizin. I don't think they care if he goes to the UFC and represents Rizin. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, you know what? It's so funny. I'll tell this on the record. Of course, as a promoter, he doesn't want to see his champion getting picked by the UFC and it goes there, right? I mean, even in the comment, he even said it that I kind of hate UFC for doing this and blah blah blah, those sort of stuff. But here's what it is, though. This is the Japanese thing. I think the speech Horiguchi made in the Rizin ring before, when he announced he's going to UFC and blah blah blah. Do you remember what he said? He said, "This is my start." It's sort of like a beginning point.
Yeah.
The big issue is this: he's never thanked Rizin or thanked Sakakibara. I think that ticked him off more than anything else, to tell the truth. In a way, it's easy to push the button that makes Sakakibara happy. But fighters don't realize that.
I don't know Horiguchi, so I don't want to speak for him. But my impression has always been he thought he was doing Rizin a favor by being the guy that was the number 2 UFC fighter, came over, lifted Rizin up onto his shoulders, and helped carry it through the pandemic kind of thing.
That's actually, I understand how a fighter feels that way, but anybody who runs the events like that knows that one fighter can never do that. Never. Yeah. Right. So it's the collaborative effort. So the point is like, I think the fighters should learn how to be a little political.
It's going to happen.
Right. You don't have to tell whole truth, but nothing but truth. This isn't the position here.
You keep a good rapport because after his UFC days are over, he can always come back to Rizin and get some good paydays before he retires.
Exactly. So look at Horiguchi now. He's out of the first UFC fight because of injury, right? So now when he's going to get the next fight, and again, this is going to be a long career now because of UFC. Once you skip fights, you may have to wait another 6 months. And I say 2 fights a year, maybe 1 fight a year, right? So
he's not a young guy.
Nope. So That's why, in a way, in that sense, Gomi played it great.
Yeah,
Gomi never said anything negative about Pride. He always praised them when he went to UFC. So what did he do? He got a very good payday in the Rizin too. I mean, exactly. So I think in a way, I don't know if he ever planned it that way, but I think he played it well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Next comment. Like, I want to cover this too. Will you cover Billy JTT drama?
This is very interesting. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, I am. I mean, I don't want to say so much about it, but he did reveal the work ethics of those JTT fighters are in question, right? I mean,
not 100% correct. I mean, for certain, but I believe the interview is in the Gong physical magazine, not on the website.
Right.
The impression, I haven't read it, but what I've understood is Billy claims he was mistranslated, but the idea of what he said was Hiroya was the only guy working hard at JTT, so he was the only guy that I wanted to pay my attention to. I kind of lost motivation because no one was doing hard work, and that's why I want to bring Hiroya back to the U.S. with me. Is the gist that I've come to understand. I haven't read it, but that's what I've understood the gist of his comments are. Which is funny because before I left to Japan, I met up with a couple fighters that train at JTT, and I heard quite a different story. I heard a story that after Ellie left, Billy only focused on he was only interested in Hiroya and Kai, who are two very famous popular fighters that make a lot of money.
Sure.
And that the fighters I was speaking to said, one, Billy never ever spoke to them. Like they would try to communicate with Billy and Billy would just ignore them. And that Billy was only interested in coaching like his quote unquote pet students, aka those two people, and then he kind of isolated himself. Right. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard from numerous people that do train there.
Right. And also Hori, who is the owner of that gym, has tweeted it. Says this is the time you have to understand you have to put your own money, sort of thing. Yeah. And it seems like that both Asakura was not willing to put so much money on the team itself.
Well, right? The same person I was speaking to also told me that the Asakura brothers famously never pay for anything themselves.
No.
And so if Hori's, and I think Hori's issue was that he got sold on this point of bringing these coaches over to coach the team. But what ended up happening was there was the financial issue with Billy that we covered in a previous episode. So Billy's gone. And then, not Billy, I mean Ellie.
Ellie, yeah.
Then there's Billy, and I think Hori was like, I'm not going to pay this guy just to coach two fighters. I have an entire gym here of people that need to be coached. He probably saw it as a waste of money. So he told it sounds like he told Kai to pay this guy herself, and Kai said no.
It's funny that I think still this day that kind of exists that if you became a top athlete, it's not just only MMA, boxing, or even judo, amateur sports. You get spoiled by sponsors and everybody else in a way that it's normal for them not to pay. Like it's normal for everybody around you to serve you and do the work for you because it will be beneficial for your business to be able to work with Asakura. So the ones who do it for free kind of stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, I've never really talked about it in the public, and I will for the first time, that I'm so disgusted with Ippei Mizuhara did to Shohei Ohtani, like how he bet all this money and stuff like that. But some of the bits of the pieces, it says that I thought about this. For example, like first couple of years in the Angels, Ippei was making only $80,000 a year. And you and I know that's a very low pay. And there was some report about, Shohei had to pay his $30,000 dental fee. So that's clearly he didn't even get the benefits, right, for dental. I mean, this is really Major League Baseball here. And the guy is making millions of dollars. And they're like clearly, okay, fine. Ippei should have talked to Ohtani about it, right? But the point is that athletes doesn't recognize things like that. You know what I mean? Like, right? So, I mean, you got to take care of the guys around you, and you feel like you're doing it, but not up to that point. So
you look back to the Asakura brothers. I think at least one of them, maybe both, is very much into like how much money can I make doing this, and fame. I mean, I know people tried to interview them in the past, not me, but I know people that did, and the Asakura brothers wouldn't do interviews unless you paid them.
Here's what it is. Okay, that's a media, but here's what it is. I think, Charlie, coaches or training partners, they're just different from media, right? I mean, when Hideo Nomo became famous, when he came back to Japan, they demanded the money to each media to pay to interview him. So I guess that's a style. Who cares? But point is this: media is different from coaches and training partners. They're like, if you're a musician, they're like your band members, right? The guys who make your music better. So why don't you pay them good money? If you think you're a top star, then your crew should be paid well. Do you know what I mean? That's my, like, I don't understand, like, some fighters, athletes, doesn't have that kind of mindset,
Well, I was talking to somebody about this, and I said, with the kind of money now that Kai is making, why isn't he just doing what boxers or like Brock Lesnar did or GSP did? Why isn't he bringing in his own sparring partner, his own coaches, and getting the best possible training camp he can? Because he's getting paid millions now, so why isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. I think he's not really surrounding himself with the right people because, like you said, that all these are probably a good tax write-off for your training expenses and stuff like that. So, I mean, I agree with you. Unless if you're willing to build your own team, own gym, and if you want to just build your career, that would be the right way to go for him. But if you're not willing to spend the money to make yourself a better fighter and relying on the sponsors to pick up those tabs, it's going to be difficult because you're not going to be able to do what you really want to do.
You have to do what you want to do within what your sponsors are willing to pay for.
Exactly. Again, I'm going to go to the analogy of a musician. You want to make a best recording, right? Like to make the best album. Then you're going to have a control over it, right? So you're going to ask your sponsors, can we do this? Can we do that? Can I have this? No, right? So I hope athletes understands that. I mean, especially if you get to that level.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, fight sports, we all know majority of them make a shit money, right? I mean, so it's hard to think in that kind of angle. And when you see like Mayweather going bankrupt.
I bring up Kai as the example because he got paid millions in his last fight. So that guy could potentially do the thing where you make your own fight camp.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I mean, if you're smart enough, you can probably make a business out of that too. You know how Rizin is doing open training, open workout, and they're making a business out of it. And same thing. I mean, you could create the team for your camp 2 months and maybe sell that rights to some TV station or streaming company to the documentary about it. Stuff like that to cover the expenses. You know what I mean?
I know Japanese fighters love sponsors. You could probably find sponsors to help sponsor the training camp, things like that.
That too, because here's what it is. Because my favorite guy, Yazawa, the rock and roll guy, that he came to America, did the tour. Of course, he only played in small places.
Yeah,
you sell 400 tickets. You're never going to cover all the expenses, right? I mean, so what did he do? He cut the deal with the Wow Wow to cover, the live. So you make that money on that to make sure you cover the expenses. So a guy like Kai should have that kind of an advantage, right? I mean, he should be able to. I mean, I will talk to you next, or Abema first. Our next fight, I'm doing the 2 month, and I'm gathering the top fight coaches, training partners. It's like gathering a top musician to the tour. And let's do a documentary, follow up on that. You pay me, and they cover the expenses.
Abema has a history of working with the Asakura brothers.
Exactly.
And Abema did those go train in the U.S. shows. This would be amazing content for them. They would get a ton of views.
I mean, don't you think so? I mean, I don't know why the fighters don't think that way because, and I hope people around him is advising that because he has that kind of power. He may be the only one, right, in a way. And his next fight in UFC, Elliott may be injured, so who knows when he's going to get fight. But I think he can make a whole story about it. He can stop that, right? I mean, so that would cover the expenses.
Yeah, it'd be great. Plus, think of the exposure.
And it will make him a better fighter.
Yeah, right? Most important.
That's most important because training is your job, basically. If you're a fighter. So
listen, we have a comment about Rin and Mikuru, which I think is probably more in your category.
Yeah, but I can't really talk about that. I mean, the point is this. I mean, of course, but here's what it is, though. Sakakibara is smart enough to know that he's not gonna pretend like, oh, I need you, otherwise I can't do this show. You know what I mean? Like he will always have a backup plans, backup plans, backup plans. So so if the rain is not ready, he's not gonna push it.
Yeah.
But I think rain can be ready, and then the New Year's Eve will be the perfect timing. Because like some fans think, oh, then maybe Ren should challenge Shaydullaev and stuff like that. It makes zero sense. But again, the problem with the Rizin is this: even Naoki's next opponent, or even Shaydullaev's next opponent, the division is not really established enough, right? To create even 1 to 5 ranking. So it's hard to locate the next challenger.
Yeah, because ideally, in an ideal situation, to bring in a foreign challenger, you want them to have 1, 2 fights in Rising, allow the Japanese people to get to know who this person is before you do that fight, and they haven't been doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And no, that's why even Naoki's next opponent, it's very limited choice,
Yeah.
And then one guy gets injured or can make a weight on time, whatever that is, and your second choice is just that's it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope that's why I'm hoping Rising will add more international shows too.
Right.
Adds number of shows which will give Shingo and Sakibara, Mr. Sahara, whatever, to create more division. You need more fights.
It gives them a great opportunity to find local talent that they might not have found before.
I know they need to do that because in a way, like for example, Korean MMA market is not exactly thriving anymore, right? I mean, what's going on? The Black Combat is okay, but
what's so weird about that though is Korea's never had a really stable MMA promotion long term, but they do develop amazing fighters.
I know.
Great market for Rising to tap to get
right. But again, it's very difficult because most of the Korean fighters, if they became good, they really all gonna go to UFC. I know that. And there are a lot of guys who has a very good record and good fighters. It's still out there. And I always try to reach out to them and of course try to sign them and try to explain to them that you can't sit around and wait. Make us active, So why don't you fight even one fight contract Rising or whatever it is. Most of them will always say like, "Whoa, you gotta get me to UFC. That's the only way. I'll sign with you," kind of thing. But that's not the right approach,
Right.
Yeah, but
they probably see like Korean Zombie and Stun Gun Kim and all those guys went to the UFC, so that's where they want to go. But they just don't.
I get that. And if you became big, the money you're going to make, of course, it's not a comparison to the promotions.
Yeah.
But only the half will make it that way, right? So,
yeah. And before we stop, I did want to mention one thing. I was just kind of impressed. Shuto has been kind of quietly signing some good female talent. Aya Murakami joined Shuto recently and joined their Infinity League. They got Erika, the old Rise kickboxing champion, over there. And then Hikaru Aono, Shuto Watanabe's girlfriend.
That's right. Yeah, they signed her too.
Just announced that she joined Shuto. And Emi Fujino, who is a pancreas fighter but is the Shuto champion, is now announced that she's defending her title against Bo Hyun Park. The Korean girl has been doing very well in Shuto recently. And they just signed the new ACC young girl, I think she's like 17, Atsui Takada. So it is nice because, I mean, Deep Jewels clearly makes a lot of female talent. But, I mean, Pancrase is doing their thing as well. And now Shuto is doing their thing. So it's nice to see new fighters and the fighters kind of moving around, the environment changing. I'm wondering, because it seems like to me, you don't have to comment this, we don't want to, but it seems like Deep Jewels has kind of like turned the page and they're reinvesting in a bunch of younger fighters or kind of the younger fighters and these like what I want to call idol fighters that are ones that sell tickets, but they're never going to be world champions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Deep is almost same as Rising now. They have a competitive division and an entertainment and an influencer division, and both could go to the Rising. It's the point, So I mean, Rise is in good position. I mean, the Deep is in good position,
But why I bring that up is I think because they did that, I think some of their older fighters, I mean, Deep Jewels is when they first started the promotion, they learned from the mistakes of Smack Girl and that they're not going to overextend themselves. They're going to do 5 events a year. this month, this month, this month. Only so many fights. So I think that's why you're seeing some of these deep jewels fighters leave to go to other promotions because they're a little bit older. They aren't getting the push because Deep is now focusing on the younger fighters and these idol fighters. So it's kind of interesting to see if we see more of these older fighters move to the side.
Sure. And also, of course, in any country, anywhere, that there's always a group of people who prefer Shuto, dedicated to Shuto or dedicated to Pancras and stuff like that. And group of people who doesn't really get along with, Like,
you mentioned about the gym pressure before. I interviewed Ayamo Takami, and she said, well, I train at a Shuto gym. And you got to think, she trains at a Shuto gym. There's probably a lot of pressure for her there.
That's right. I mean, official Shuto gym, because a lot of gyms still in Japan still put the sign says Shuto official gym, blah, 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 right?
And there's official Pancrase gyms. There's official Shuto gyms. I mean, yeah, that pressure exists.
But really, our gym owner, what's the benefit for doing that? Just make an MMA gym and just book fighters through all these different kind of promotions.
I think 20 years ago, there was a benefit to it. I think the benefit no longer exists.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's where the problem the Kuroda had with the K1 contract too, right? So the contract with the gym,
the gym is a different contract than the promotion. Very confusing. Right. But I'm just saying that because I like to see things moving in the women's MMA division, and things are moving around, things are changing. So I'm very interested to see what ends up happening.
Yeah. So, but I hope both promotions will at least get to the stage they can hold their own all-women events. They haven't got that. It's only putting a women fights into the regular shows, right? So, yeah. All right. So I guess this time I did okay. It streamed fine.
The comments, I think it recorded. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's do this again, maybe even next week if you have time. I know you're busy, right? I mean,
but let's do it. I love talking about it. So yeah.
Okay, and we can certainly maybe transfer to this show to more talk about non-fight sports too.
I want to talk to you about that later. So we talk about this after the show, but I would like to start. I like your idea of slowly introducing non-fight comments, non-fight content as well. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I guess thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a week then.
Yeah, let's do it.
See you.